Money is not wealth. This is the first delusion the world believes, and the first illusion the Machiavellian breaks. Money is a symbol, a token, a fluid. It moves, it hides, it burns, and it can be taken away overnight. Real wealth, as every billionaire who lasts understands, is not the number in your account, but the architecture of control you build around it. To the weak, money is treasure. To the strong, money is a lever, and the lever is only as powerful as the psychology it manipulates. Billionaires know this well. They don't think like employees, or even like entrepreneurs chasing sales. They think like architects of dependency. John D. Rockefeller didn't simply sell oil. He designed pipelines, monopolies, and trusts that made entire industries orbit around his pricing power. Jeff Bezos didn't just build an online bookstore. He created an ecosystem so wide that merchants, publishers, and even governments became dependent on Amazon's infrastructure. Elon Musk doesn't simply sell cars. He bends financial markets with his tweets, moving billions with a sentence, because the perception of his influence is itself capital. These men didn't just chase money. They engineered structures of control. That's the Machiavellian difference. So, let's begin with the first principle of billionaire psychology. Rule 1. Never chase the prize, chase the position. Most people work for money. They fight for salaries, contracts, promotions, and inheritances. They chase the prize placed in front of them by someone else. But billionaires rarely chase. They design. They ask, what position do I need to hold so that the money has no choice but to flow to me? Rockefeller positioned himself as the gatekeeper of oil transport. Carnegie positioned himself as the master of steel production. Warren Buffett positioned himself as the one investor whose stamp of approval could raise or sink a company's stock. They didn't run after money. They positioned themselves so that money ran after them. Look around at those who boast about income. They are celebrating the prize, but the Machiavellian billionaire smiles quietly. He knows the true power is not in the check, but in the fact that he decides who gets one. That's not income. That's dominion. Rule 2. Money magnifies character. It never creates it. Here is where psychology cuts deepest. When a man suddenly becomes wealthy, the world assumes he has changed. But the truth is simpler. Wealth doesn't transform, it exposes. The arrogant become unbearable. The insecure hide behind luxury. The generous perform charity for applause. This is why so many lottery winners self-destruct their wealth, magnifies their lack of architecture. But billionaires who endure understand that money is not an identity, it is an amplifier. And if you have not built discipline, patience, and strategy before the money arrives, you will drown in your own reflection once it does. Bill Gates didn't become strategic because of billions. He had already mastered strategy long before, cornering IBM with software licensing deals that locked Windows into the foundation of computing. The billions merely revealed the depth of his discipline. Warren Buffett didn't become patient after he was rich. His wealth only magnified a temperament he had already forged in silence. The ability to wait for years before acting. This is why Machiavelli would say, do not chase money to feel powerful. Build power and let money magnify it. Rule 3. Visibility is weakness. Secrecy is armor. The modern world obsesses over visibility. The flex. Watches, jets, cars, houses on Instagram. But billionaires who truly understand Machiavellian dynamics know that the louder your wealth becomes, the more fragile you are. Because the moment people know what you have, they begin calculating how to take it. The moment politicians see your excess, they begin drafting laws to strip it. And the moment rivals measure your empire, they begin plotting its collapse. This is why some of the most powerful fortunes in history were built in shadows. The Rothschild family never revealed their true net worth. They used layers of trusts, banks, and shell structures so that their influence was invisible yet undeniable. Even today, families like the Waltons move silently, never displaying the true scale of their wealth, because they know wealth without mystery is vulnerability. Contrast this with those who flaunt. How many celebrities, athletes, and nouveau riche entrepreneurs burn bright, only to collapse under debt, lawsuits, and public scrutiny? They thought the display of wealth was power, but Machiavelli knew concealment is power. If your wealth is the loudest thing about you, you have already lost. Rule 4. Dependence is slavery, even when disguised as luxury. Here lies the trap that ruins most who rise quickly. They confuse high income with independence. They buy houses with mortgages controlled by banks. They run companies dependent on venture capital that can vanish with a call. They live lifestyles tied to platforms they don't own. And then, when the lever is pulled by a government, a bank, a partner, or a market crash, they discover the cruelest truth. They were never wealthy. They were only well-decorated prisoners. The Machiavellian billionaire avoids this by building structures that cannot be frozen or erased by another man's decision. Assets in multiple jurisdictions, revenue streams that flow even in silence, fortresses of ownership hidden behind layers of legal shields. This is why someone like Elon Musk can survive scandals, lawsuits, and even near bankruptcy. He has engineered dependencies so large Tesla shareholders, governments betting on green energy, NASA relying on SpaceX that his survival becomes a national interest. He doesn't just have money, he has leverage. And leverage is harder to confiscate than cash. Rule 5. Money is the most efficient test of loyalty. Words deceive, promises fade, but money exposes. This is a principle every true billionaire learns to master. Give someone access to wealth, and you will see whether their loyalty deepens or dissolves. Make money while they don't, and you will discover whether they celebrate or resent you. Offer opportunities, and you will see whether they treat them as stewardship or entitlement. Consider how Warren Buffett tests his business partners. He rarely signs complicated contracts. Instead, he invests in people he has observed under pressure, people whose character has been revealed in financial matters. He knows money exposes what men pretend not to be. That is why Machiavellian wealth is never announced. It is deployed strategically, not to bless, but to test. Who can handle advantage without arrogance? Who can handle scarcity without betrayal? Money doesn't lie, and billionaires who endure know this. Never listen to what people say about loyalty. Watch what money makes them do. If money is only a lever, then the true game is not wealth itself, but how that lever is used to control behavior. Billionaires understand this in ways the average man cannot. The average man thinks money buys freedom. The Machiavellian knows money buys obedience, often disguised as choice. Power is not when you can purchase. Power is when others censor themselves, alter their behavior, and bend their loyalty because of what you control. And the most efficient billionaires use psychology as much as strategy to multiply their influence. Rule 6. The weak worship money, the strong control access to it. Most people are stuck in the worship stage. They fantasize about riches, hustle for bonuses, dream of the big exit. They beg for capital, chase investors, or spend their lives serving the paycheck. But billionaires know that the true game is not in owning the money, but in controlling the gates through which others must pass to get it. Think of Jeff Bezos. Millions of merchants don't dream of wealth. They dream of visibility on Amazon. Bezos turned Amazon into the infrastructure of global retail. He doesn't just own wealth, he owns the platform that allocates wealth to others. That makes him indispensable. Merchants orbit Amazon, not because they love it, but because they cannot survive without it. That's not riches, that's gravitational pull. Or, consider how venture capitalists operate. They don't beg for startups. Startups beg for them. Access to their capital is a filter. They allocate, and with that allocation comes obedience, branding, and control. This is why the Machiavellian billionaire doesn't scream about being rich. He builds systems where others scream for his approval. Rule 7. Money is bait, not the prize. Here lies the most dangerous illusion. The world believes the chase ends with the check, the raise, the contract. But Machiavellian billionaires smile as others celebrate. because they know money is the bait, the hook is dependency. Kings once paid courtiers not out of generosity, but to ensure their survival was tied to the throne. Corporations today use salaries, stock options, and golden handcuffs to keep the brightest minds trapped in gilded cages. Look at Google or Apple. They don't just pay engineers. They surround them with cafeterias, perks, social status, and stock packages that vest over years. These are not rewards. These are chains disguised as gifts. And employees, terrified of losing the comfort, self-censor, overwork, and compete to please their masters. That's Machiavellian architecture. You don't rule by paying the most. You rule by letting others fear what life would look like without your money. This is why billionaires design ecosystems where people tie their identities to the benefits they provide. The money is secondary. The fear of losing it is the true leash. Rule 8. Comfort is the softest prison. People imagine that power is maintained through fear, through threats, through punishment. But billionaires know that the strongest prison is comfort. Once someone tastes a lifestyle, a salary, a level of privilege, their greatest fear becomes regression. Not because they are greedy, but because identity fuses with income. Consider the rise of middle management in corporations. These men and women don't rebel, not because they are powerless, but because they fear losing the fragile status money gives them. Their mortgage, their car, their school tuition, all of it is built on the approval of someone above them. They obey not because they love their bosses, but because they cannot risk losing the life money sustains. The Machiavellian billionaire uses this subtly. He doesn't need to scream, "Do as I say." He simply creates conditions where disobedience feels like a threat to identity. He delays a promotion, redirects attention elsewhere, or lets silence speak. That's enough. The target bends not because they are forced, but because they cannot imagine life without the comfort you engineered. Rule 9. Wealth without mystery invites predators. Here lies one of the darkest truths. The world does not admire wealth. It measures it. When you show off, people calculate. They calculate how much you spent, how much you wasted, how much could be taken, and how fragile you are. The loud, rich man attracts applause from those beneath him, but predators from those above him. And billionaires who last never confuse applause with power. This is why the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and the most enduring dynasties operate through layers of secrecy. They own corporations through trusts. They influence politics through proxies. They never reveal the true depth of their wealth because invisibility is the sharpest shield. The flamboyant millionaire may trend on Instagram, but he is already being dissected by lawyers, regulators, rivals, and enemies. Contrast this with Warren Buffett. His image is crafted deliberately modest, frugal, a man who eats McDonald's breakfast and lives in the same house for decades. But don't be fooled. That appearance of humility is itself a Machiavellian shield. While people see him as harmless, he controls one of the most powerful conglomerates on earth. Mystery isn't about silence alone. It's about crafting perception so that others underestimate you. Rule 10. Become unshakable without money. This is where the psychology of power transforms into something almost untouchable. Most people are terrified of losing money because their identity depends on it. Billionaires who endure cultivate the opposite: detachment. They know they can lose fortunes and rebuild them because their true wealth is not the cash, but the architecture, the mindset, the network, the leverage, the patience. This is why Elon Musk can risk billions on SpaceX rockets exploding and yet attract even more capital afterward. It is why Richard Branson could watch Virgin Ventures collapse and still rise again. They are not defined by the balance sheet. They are defined by their ability to rebuild the machine, and this makes them psychologically untouchable. The most dangerous man in the room is not the richest. It is the one who can walk away without fear. That single fact flips every negotiation. When you don't need the deal, when you don't crave the approval, when you can detach from the money others worship, you become unreachable by manipulation. And that is when the lever of money bends around you, not the other way around. Rule 11. Control the flow. control the frame. This is the essence of billionaire psychology. It is not enough to hold wealth. You must decide where it flows. Rockefeller understood this. He didn't just own oil. He decided the price others would pay. J.P. Morgan didn't just accumulate capital. He became the lender of last resort so that even governments bent to his frame. Modern billionaires like Larry Page and Sergey Brin don't just profit from Google. They control the flow of information, which frames reality itself for billions of people. To control the flow is to decide not only how money moves, but how perception moves. If you are the dispenser, others forgive your mistakes, flatter your ego, and obey your silence. You don't need to command. Your pause becomes pressure. Your absence becomes punishment. That is power far beyond money. That is Machiavellian wealth influence that bends behavior without force. The higher the wealth, the more invisible the power must become. Billionaires who last are not loud architects. They are shadow builders. They know that wealth is not measured in numbers, but in dependency. And the most enduring fortunes are built not in what people see, but in what people cannot trace. Rule 12. Never reveal the full system. The modern world celebrates transparency. Show your net worth, teach your methods, become a guru. But the Machiavellian billionaire understands the danger. Once you reveal the system, others can replicate it. And once they replicate it, they no longer need you. Look at the Koch brothers. Their political machine is not public seminars on influence. It is a network of think tanks, lobbyists, and grassroots organizations so complex that no single actor understands the whole. That secrecy is by design. It prevents replication and ensures dependency. Politicians, academics, and activists benefit from their funding, but they never see the blueprint. That way, their survival depends on continuous access, not self-sufficiency. Contrast this with short-lived entrepreneurs who publish every detail of their success formula. They may sell courses, write books, and flaunt tactics, but their empires collapse because they have armed competitors with the same weapons. The Machiavellian billionaire doesn't educate the masses. He architects their dependence. Rule 13. Give results, not replicability. This is how billionaires create myth. They allow people to benefit from their ecosystem, but never understand it. Amazon merchants may profit, Google advertisers may grow, Tesla investors may win, but none of them fully control the machinery. They taste the outcome, but cannot own the process. This creates psychological capture. Users begin to trust Amazon more than their own instincts. Brands depend on Google's algorithm instead of their own distribution. Investors follow Buffett's word instead of their own analysis. This is Machiavellian capital, not financial, but psychological. It is not enough that people profit from you. They must feel that without you, their compass collapses. Rule 14. Generosity is obligation in disguise. Where the world sees charity, the Machiavellian billionaire sees leverage. When you give strategically, you create invisible strings. People rarely forget humiliation, but they never escape obligation. That moment of rescue binds them far deeper than any contract. Think of Andrew Carnegie. His libraries were not only acts of philanthropy, they were monuments of psychological branding. Generations associated knowledge and opportunity with his name. Gratitude became loyalty, loyalty became protection. Or consider Warren Buffett's rescue investments during the 2008 crisis. He didn't simply save Goldman Sachs or Bank of America. He positioned Berkshire Hathaway as a patron, extracting loyalty and influence while appearing generous. This is why billionaires give quietly, selectively, and strategically. They don't give to be admired, they give to be remembered, and in memory lies leverage far stronger than in applause. Rule 15. Attach strings no one can cut. The art of strategic generosity is not in scale, but in design. If you give in a way that feels repeatable, you create entitlement. If you give in a way that feels rare and irreplaceable, you create loyalty. Billionaires master this art. They offer opportunities that feel sacred. They open doors that seem impossible without them. And because the beneficiary cannot imagine accessing the same fortune elsewhere, They become tethered, not to the gift, but to the giver. This is why governments often tolerate billionaires they could regulate more harshly. Jobs, investments, tax revenues, and donations create webs of obligation. Politicians fear losing the comfort billionaires provide their constituencies. The billionaire doesn't need to threaten, he only needs to let them imagine discomfort. That alone binds loyalty. Rule 16. Dependency is stronger than domination. Domination breeds rebellion. Dependency breeds obedience. A tyrant must always look over his shoulder, but a patron sits calmly as others police themselves. This is the highest psychology of wealth, creating conditions where people censor themselves, obey silently, and compete to serve you without commands. Consider how Apple engineers its ecosystem. Once you own an iPhone, you're nudged into iCloud, then AirPods, then MacBooks. Each layer makes leaving harder. It's not domination. It's dependency disguised as convenience. And that dependency multiplies wealth effortlessly. Billionaires know that if you make others dependent on your capital, your platform, or your approval, you no longer need to demand respect. They orbit you automatically. That is the Machiavellian difference between being rich and being untouchable. Rule 17. Control perception, not just possession. Wealth is fragile without narrative. Billionaires know that people don't just calculate money, they interpret it. If you control the perception of your wealth, you can magnify its effect. If you lose control of the narrative, your wealth becomes ammunition for enemies. This is why families like the Waltons cultivate a reputation of humility despite controlling more wealth than entire nations. It is why Buffett speaks in simple language, calling himself a teacher of value investing while operating one of the most complex conglomerates in history. It is why Musk frames his ventures as saving humanity, even when they rely on government subsidies and speculative capital. The Machiavellian secret: wealth is only as powerful as the story that surrounds it. Narratives protect, narratives disarm, narratives magnify, and the billionaire who controls perception controls the battlefield. Rule 18. Confusion is protection. Transparency is overrated. Billionaires know that the less people understand about your empire, the safer you are. Complexity is not an accident, it is armor. Amazon's financial structure, Berkshire Hathaway's subsidiaries, and multinational tax shelters are not just efficiency tools, they are smokescreens. Confusion prevents regulation. Confusion discourages rivals. Confusion makes predators hesitate. When no one can trace the full extent of your assets, no one can calculate the perfect attack. That is why secrecy is not paranoia for billionaires. It is design. Rule 19. Power is not in wealth itself, but in the fear of losing it. This is the ultimate psychological lever. People don't work hardest to gain wealth. They work hardest to avoid losing it. Billionaires exploit this truth relentlessly. They don't just offer money. They offer lifestyles, reputations, and privileges that people fuse with their identity. And then, subtly, they let others feel the edges of potential loss. Not enough to panic, just enough to remind them. This is how corporations keep employees loyal. This is how patrons keep allies silent. This is how billionaires make men bow without words. It is not cruelty, it is structure. Because when someone fears regression more than they desire advancement, they will chain themselves to you. At the highest levels of wealth, the billionaire no longer plays for riches. He plays for permanence. Money, after all, is fleeting. Inflation erodes it, governments tax it, and markets devour it. But structures, perceptions, and psychological systems, these outlast lifetimes. The Machiavellian billionaire knows that wealth is not victory. Wealth is only raw material. The true art is converting money into power that cannot be erased, into influence that lives beyond the man himself. Rule 20. Build systems, not fortunes. The ordinary rich accumulate assets. The billionaire Machiavellian builds architectures. Rockefeller did not simply profit from oil. He built Standard Oil into a monopoly that dictated the terms of energy for decades. Even after antitrust laws dismantled the company, his wealth multiplied because the system was designed to outlive any single company. Modern billionaires follow the same principle. Zuckerberg does not merely own Facebook. He owns the infrastructure of social interaction itself. Elon Musk is not simply building cars. He is embedding himself into the future of space travel, energy, and communication. These are not businesses. They are systems that frame the future. Money buys temporary victories. Systems buy inevitability. The Machiavellian billionaire plays not for earnings, but for ecosystems. Rule 21. Influence institutions, not individuals. The mistake of the novice is to buy loyalty, one man at a time. The master influences the institutions that shape men. This is why billionaires fund universities, control media outlets, or cultivate relationships with central banks. A single ally can betray you, but an institution infected with your influence reproduces loyalty across generations. Consider George Soros. Through his foundations, he shapes educational curricula, activist networks, and legal reforms across continents. He doesn't need to control every activist. He influences the frameworks that train them. Or, look at Rupert Murdoch. His media empire doesn't just make him money. It frames political discourse, creating conditions where leaders rise and fall depending on his narrative. The billionaire Machiavellian knows, control the stream that educates, informs, and rewards people, and you no longer need to convince individuals. They come preconditioned. Rule 22. Make your wealth invisible, but your impact undeniable. This is the paradox of Machiavellian wealth. Display riches, and you attract envy, predators, and regulators. Hide wealth entirely, and you risk irrelevance. The balance is to make your impact visible, while your true wealth remains obscure. Look at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Bill Gates is not remembered as the monopolist who crushed competitors. He is framed as the philanthropist trying to cure diseases. The narrative is visible. The wealth structure is not. His reputation provides armor, while his money works quietly in trusts, investments, and influence networks. Silence is protection. Impact is branding. And when those are combined, a billionaire's empire becomes untouchable. Rule 23. Fear silence more than criticism. Criticism is not the enemy. It keeps you relevant. It signals you are still powerful enough to threaten. What billionaires truly fear is silence, the kind that signals irrelevance, the kind that means you no longer occupy mental real estate. This is why billionaires carefully manage their presence. Musk tweets not because he is careless, but because visibility cements relevance. Buffett writes annual letters, not because he must, but because the narrative sustains his myth. Bezos gives interviews about the future of humanity, not because he enjoys exposure, but because relevance maintains power. The Machiavellian lesson: never confuse negative attention with weakness. Obscurity is far deadlier than scandal. Rule 24. Engineer your succession. Dynasties endure because they plan for mortality. The billionaire who thinks only of his own lifetime is a rich man. The one who engineers succession is a monarch. Look at the Walton family. Sam Walton is long dead, but Walmart remains one of the most dominant corporations in the world because ownership was structured across generations. The Rothschilds spread their wealth and influence across family branches, embedding themselves into banking systems across Europe. Machiavelli wrote that princes must secure heirs to prevent chaos. Billionaires obey the same logic. Through trusts, family offices, and foundations, they ensure their fortune is not simply inherited, but deployed strategically, guarded against dilution, and protected against rivals. The greatest wealth is not what you make, it is what remains untouchable when you are gone. Rule 25. Silence is the final fortress. At the summit of wealth, words are dangerous. Every statement can be weaponized, every revelation exploited. This is why the most powerful billionaires speak less than the world imagines. They let proxies talk. They let institutions carry their message. They cultivate an aura of inevitability rather than direct command. J.P. Morgan once said, "A man always has two reasons for doing anything, a good reason and the real reason." Billionaires internalize this. They rarely reveal the real reason. Silence becomes their sharpest tool. By saying less, they invite projection, mystery, and fear. Enemies stumble in the dark, allies speculate endlessly, and the billionaire remains untouchable. It is no accident that the wealthiest dynasties in history are the least understood. Their silence was not weakness, it was their fortress. Rule 26. Wealth is not the goal, power is. At last, the circle closes. The Machiavellian billionaire knows that wealth, left in isolation, is brittle. It can be seized, taxed, diluted, inflated away. But power, the ability to bend behavior, to design dependency, to frame perception, and to shape the future that endures. This is why the ultimate pursuit is not money, but sovereignty. To be rich is to count dollars. To be powerful is to design the conditions in which others count you. Machiavelli's ghost would smile at the billionaires of today, for they live his lessons more faithfully than kings once did. They know that men bow not to gold, but to the fear of losing it. They know that silence terrifies more than threats. They know that the story is more valuable than the balance sheet. And above all, they know that the weak chase riches, while the strong design worlds in which riches chase them. Money is not freedom. Money is not victory. Money is only the mirror, the lever, the bait. Billionaires multiply wealth not because they love money more, but because they understand its psychology more deeply. They know that comfort enslaves, mystery protects, dependency binds, and silence commands. The man who seeks riches will remain a servant to them. The Machiavellian who seeks power will use riches as tools. And the billionaire who ascends beyond wealth itself will not merely own fortunes. He will write the rules by which fortunes are measured. This is the final secret. Wealth ends, power endures, and the man who wields both with silence becomes untouchable.